On today's show, the Hawks suffer one of their worst losses of the season, quite frankly, on this Sunday evening in Brooklyn. We'll get into how it unfolded, why it unfolded, and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1931 of Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening into Monday here in mid-March. Today's show is brought to you by the folks at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com. 50% off your first year. Check it out now at monarchmoney.com. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcast. That means Apple and Spotify, Amazon Music, etc. Plus, we are also on YouTube, so please like this video as you are watching it. Subscribe to the channel, comment on the channel, spread the word to your friends, and definitely appreciate you listening to the podcast, in particular after a pretty rough loss for the Hawks. So we'll dive in now to a less than stellar, uplifting start to the week for Atlanta, to be sure. Ends up being a 122-114 loss at the hands of the Brooklyn Nets on the road. And this is 2 in a row for the Hawks, and I've said they were very different losses. The loss on Friday is one that you lost to a team that's better than you probably in the standings and all those things. Yes, it was at home, but it was not quite this. It was frustrating, yes. They had a chance. They had a disastrous third quarter on Friday. If you want more on that game, I did a whole podcast about it on Friday night. This is a different kind of loss. In fact, I think it was certainly one of their worst losses of the season, and quite frankly, maybe their worst, in my opinion. When you throw in all the context necessary, yes, they've been bigger favorites in certain games, betting-wise, this season. They did lose to the Wizards twice, for instance, back in October. But given the situation, the opponent, a shorthanded, March-style Brooklyn Nets team, yes, it was also on the road, but it was a back-to-back for Brooklyn and not for Atlanta. The Hawks led this game by 8 points in the third quarter, pretty much late in the third quarter, I would say. It was pretty brutal all the way around. They didn't lose by 40. I get all that, but given the stakes and the situation, it was a very rough, dire loss for Atlanta. And they also missed Karis LeVert in this game pretty badly. They missed Clint Capella in this game pretty badly, I thought. But the Nets were also missing guys as well. It's just a game that you can't afford to lose. And if you're a regular listener, you will know that I am very big on trying to provide context and nuance and perspective on games, in particular losses, and even wins, especially during the regular season. Because, 1 of 82 is something that it's a trope, but it's also true. So I'm not saying the season's over or anything like that. Or people should be fired. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to rant and rave, but it was a very bad loss. There's qualifiers, there's nuance, but it was a very, very bad loss. And I wanted to lead with that because, as I want to do, I'll provide some detail, some context, some nuance during the podcast, but I don't want that to get lost. I'll give some reasons why it happened. The Hawks were a little bit unlucky, for instance, shooting-wise in this game, etc. But I want to just be very clear. This is a very bad loss for the Hawks. And I don't say that lightly. Even my friend Glenn Willis of this of 1829, but I guess on the show many times, it's one of those things it's very obvious. There's no reason to try to run from this. It's a very, very rough loss for the Hawks. And honestly, one that you can look back on in a month from now, if the Hawks are the 8 seed or the 9 seed even in the East, instead of the 7 seed, and they lose it by a game, this will be one that you circle, that I will circle and probably bring up on the podcast in 4 weeks. Obviously, they're not doomed. They're actually still right now the number 7 seed and leading the Southeast Division at this moment, but certainly not a game that you wanted to lose by any means. And we'll get into all of the details of that. So beyond that, it was kind of a roller coaster of a game as well that I'll add more detail to later on. They were actually down by 12 in the first half, had a big run in the middle of the game, 24-8 to take the lead. They're up by as many as 10 points after halftime. And they got absolutely rocked at the end of the third quarter into the fourth quarter, and then just went ice cold in the fourth. Just couldn't make shots on the stretch. And that kind of magnified what was already a wobbling performance, made it worse. And they were basically dead with 9 seconds to go in this game. So as we always do on the podcast, I'll kind of go big picture early on, and then later on in the pod, I will dive into the more granular details. At the end of the podcast, the final segment, I'll talk about the player-by-player evaluations in this game, what was good, what was bad, etc. But it was a two-way loss in some respects. But I have to say, one side of the floor was worse than the other, and it was the defense. Quinn Snyder said that actually very plainly after the game when he was kind of asked about what happened, basically. He said the defense was just not good enough, and I agree with that. And I would have said the same thing. Even if I hadn't watched or listened to Quinn, I would have said, look, this is a defensive first loss for Atlanta. A 122 defensive rating, which means they allowed 1.22 points per possession in this game. That is very rough against really anyone, and especially rough against a shorthanded Nets team on a back-to-back. That's not good. Also, it was 137 in the second half, almost 1.4 points per trip defensively in the second half. That's not good enough. It's just, even with the nuance and kind of the luck factor and all that, even if you stripped all that out, it wasn't good enough defensively process-wise before you even get to the results in this game. Now, I already gave the caveat to some degree that I'll have some nuance on this podcast, and I have to note this. Brooklyn was 17 of 35 from three in this game, which isn't like totally ridiculous, but it is 49% from three. And Brooklyn came into the game in the bottom 5 in the league, three-point shooting. And look, is that the reason why they lost? No, it's not the singular reason. It was part of the story. If Brooklyn had a normal shooting game, this probably would have been a very, very, very close game at the end. If they shot the ball poorly, the Hawks would have won, almost certainly. The Hawks lost the three-point line in this game by 18 points. They made 6 fewer threes than the Nets, actually, while taking 2 more threes than the Nets. If that was even, the Hawks probably win. So that's part of this. It's a make-or-miss league. That's a trope, but it's also true. And watching this game back, I think the Nets probably made, 2 or 3, maybe 4 threes that they would have, more than you expect them to actually make in this game process-wise. If you just said, all right, these 35 attempts, same spots, same contests, all of that, how many would they normally make? I don't know. I probably would have guessed like 13. So it wasn't like they were, the Hawks weren't shutting them out. I want to be very clear about that. Defensively, it just was not good enough, but it was also magnified by Brooklyn being pretty darn hot from three in this game. And really, everyone on the Nets shot well. In fact, there wasn't a single guy in the rotation that did not shoot well for Brooklyn. Cam Johnson, 4 of 8. Jalen Wilson, 2 of 4. Keon Johnson, 4 of 9. Tyrese Martin, old pal, 3 of 7. Trendon Watford, 1 of 2. Max Lewis, 2 of 4. And Reese Beekman, who was a 16% three-point shooter this year, made his only attempt. So they were all hot. And part of that defense, yes, but part of that's also a little bit of bad luck for Atlanta. Elsewhere, they got beat up pretty badly on the defensive glass in this game. It wasn't very good in any construction, but they got absolutely bludgeoned with the bench, like bludgeoned on the glass. Just put a number on it. The Nets grabbed almost half of their missed shots with Okongwu off the floor in this game. And that really bit them to some degree. There were some smaller bright spots. The Hawks did 17 turnovers in this game. They had 12 steals. They were pretty havoc-friendly. Didn't foul a ton. The Nets only shot like 47% from 2 in this game, which is very, very good. So it wasn't like a total disaster all the way around. But the threes and the rebounding, that combination was one the Hawks just could not overcome in this spot. And I'll get to the offense in a second, but sort of as a transition point here, the Hawks, like I said, were pretty good when their best players were playing in this game. The 4 guys, so I would describe as core pieces, like very clearly for this team that are still playing right now: Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, Onyeka Okongwu, Zachary Richichet. That shouldn't be controversial. Those guys are obviously key core parts of the roster, along with Jalen. Those are the 5 guys I would say are like undisputedly core parts of the team moving forward, right? Those 5 guys. 4 of them played in this game. All 4 of them played pretty well, which kind of speaks not the best about the other 5 guys. Because if all 4 of your core pieces play well, they play a lot of minutes, at least 3 of them did, and you still lose to the Nets, it means the other guys were not particularly good, in my opinion. And they were minus 17 in the Okongwu off-the-floor minutes, minus 16 without Dyson, minus 8 without Trae. And here's probably the stat of the night in some respects. And by the way, this was also evident from the eye test before the numbers even came in. The Hawks had a 107 defensive rating in this game with Okongwu on the court. That's very good, actually. Even when you adjust for the Nets, that's very good. 107. With Okongwu off the court in 16 minutes, the Hawks allowed 1.57 points per possession defensively. That's a 157 defensive rating in 16 minutes. Now, that's not all on Don Barlow, who I like. I like Don Barlow. But he had a rough night, to be sure. So the bench was rough. Even Mo Gay, who started in this game, was not particularly good. But could that be seen as a positive? Maybe if you wanted to. But the rest of the supporting pieces were not good in this game. Elsewhere, offensively, it actually was pretty good until the fourth quarter. And to be clear, even though the Hawks were down going into the fourth, actually up by 1 going into the fourth quarter, they had about a 113 offensive rating for the game, which is actually about what they averaged for the season. So it wasn't like that was a disastrous number, but it was like 120 plus until the fourth. Then they scored 22 points and couldn't make a shot in the fourth quarter. So that was part of the story too. Like they went cold at the wrong time offensively. That's fair to say. Brooklyn's number 1 strength on their whole roster is turnover creation defensively, and the Hawks actually did a really good job not turning the ball over in this game. 14 turnovers. That's a pretty good number. Only 7 live ball turnovers. Also a really good number. And also the Hawks shot 58% from 2. They had a lot of points in the paint. They did fine on the glass, but as I said before, they were 11 of 37 from three. So look, again, it would have been bad enough if the Hawks were in a dogfight with the Nets, which they probably would have been no matter what. But if the Hawks had just shot their norm and the Nets shot their norm, it would have been a close game and the Hawks probably would have won, in my opinion. But them's the breaks. What you can't afford to do is play down to your opponent and let the shooting variance be the reason why you lose in summer six. So that happened in this game. In particular, that's 29% from three as a team. I thought the three guys, Terrence Mann, George Niang, and Mo Gay, three supporting pieces, obviously. They combined to shoot 2 of 15 from three. That's pretty harmful. In particular, for a guy like Niang was 2 of 9. He made 2 of them. But when those three guys, they don't fully rely on threes to contribute. Niang kind of does. But your supporting pieces go that poorly from three when everything else is not going well, and that gets you beat too. So long story short, a bad loss for the Hawks. It was a two-way loss in some respects. Defensively, it was probably worse than offense. In fact, definitely worse than offense, in my view. No, it doesn't mean that you have to blow everything up or fire Quinn Snyder. And look, I didn't think Quinn did a great job in this game. As we'll talk about more later on, the rotation stuff, in particular with Ricochet and Dyson, and was not my favorite in this game. And I was criticizing that in real time on social media. So he's not absolved of blame here at all. But it was a full thing here. It was a full-throated loss. It's a rough one. A bad way to start out the week in a lot of ways. They do have an opportunity to right the ship a little bit on Tuesday against Charlotte on the road. We'll talk about at the end of the podcast. But for this night, it was a pretty dire performance from the Hawks, and the result followed that. All right, we'll get into more about this game in just one moment. Today's show is sponsored by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh. You save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player has 50 points or more in a game, you can score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. When any player has 50 points or more in a game during this NBA season, Dash members get 50% off and order up to $10 off the next day from noon until midnight. After an epic 50-point performance, celebrate by ordering wings or pizza or burgers from your favorite places delivered straight to your door with DoorDash. Or perhaps if you're a night owl like I am, I guess you need a snack midnight after a podcast perhaps, use Dash Pass to grab something delicious while saving big. If you want lunch on the go, also use Dash Pass to get your favorite meals with $0 delivery fees and reduced service fees as well. Plus, you can save even more now with an exclusive NBA offer. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save when any player has 50 points or more in a game. Members with Dash Pass, 50% off, and order the next day up to $10 off. Use that promo code. It's NBA50 from noon until midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. This show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get on the action like never before. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and right now, if you are a new customer, get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and everything in between. Even weigh in on which team will cut down the nets at the end. I got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and they're making it easy at FanDuel to back them with spreads and totals, player props, game props, future bets, live betting, same-game parlays, and so much more. And beyond college hoops, of course, they have the NBA at FanDuel, they have the NHL, baseball's heating up right now, football, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so much more. And with tournament games on almost every day, there's always something happening and really exciting to bet on at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel app as well is really simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly with no waiting around. Again, if you are a new customer, get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, we'll dive in now to how this game kind of unfolded and my notes along the way. Atlanta was down 14-7 to begin the game after the Nets made five of their first 6 shots. They made their first 3 threes, and that kind of set the tone to some degree for the rest of the game. The Hawks did kind of stabilize a little bit there. No surprises in the rotation, I wouldn't say, as far as who played. Now, minutes-wise, it was a little bit weird in this game, but only 9 guys appeared, with Karis LeVert sidelined with knee soreness and Clint Capella still out with family reasons. And for those asking, I don't know anything else about Clint. The listing is family reasons, which is notable because it's usually, often a guy will be listed as personal reasons. This was actually family reasons, so that's all I know is the difference. I don't know what it is, nor will I be asking family reasons or family reasons. If the Hawks want to explain that at some point, they will, but there you go. The Hawks were actually down most of the first quarter. The biggest thing was that the Nets made threes, but the Hawks also were a little bit shaky, missed free throws early on in this game, missed 4 of them in the first quarter, but they were not playing awful basketball, I didn't think, early on in the game. But they were down 12 by the middle of the second quarter after the Nets were putting up some big numbers offensively. Also, some foul stuff that I will talk about now is a stand-in for later on. Zachary Shea got kind of auto-benched. And what I mean by that is coaches will sometimes pull guys because they are in quote-unquote foul trouble. And Ricochet got his third foul in the second quarter. And he sat the remainder of the first half. I often, on the show, if you listen for a long time, will pick on this. I don't like that coaches do this. By the way, Quinn's not alone. Coaches do this all over the place. College, high school, NBA, et cetera, et cetera. Coaches just do this. And I think it's important to note like who you're doing it with and why. Ricochet is a very low foul player. He's averaging less than 3 fouls per 36 minutes this season. Very low number. So could he foul out? Maybe. But you don't need to sit Ricochet for like 10 straight minutes because he's in quote-unquote foul trouble with 3 in the first half. If he had 4, I kind of get it. 3, though, I don't understand that. And he ended up playing 23 minutes. And by the way, this is not always the case. What happened in this game, he ended the game with 3 fouls. Tough. And we'll come back to that later on. Coming out of a timeout, the Hawks were a little bit better. Okongwu had a nice block that I thought was notable there. The Hawks missed 5 shots. They're down by 10. There's actually kind of a funny quirk here. My guy, Bob Rathman of FanDuel Sports Network, was saying this on the broadcast as well, but there was a bizarre number of air balls in the first half on both sides. The Hawks had at least 3 air balls in the first half. The Nets had at least 2. Hawks assistant coach Mike Bray is, by the way, great on those mid-game interviews, and he said that they kind of joked that they were like outlawing air balls in the middle of the game, and that's why they were playing better at the end of the first half, which is kind of funny. But the Hawks did have their best run of the game at the end of the first half, 24-8 in favor of Atlanta over the final 6 minutes of the first half. Dyson got his 4th steal of the game. The Hawks won a challenge. That was a good one by Quinn to overturn a potential 4-point play for the Nets. And then the Hawks kept scoring. They actually, Trey had a big first half, 16 points. And defensively, they also had the best stretch of the game. They allowed 6 points in about 7 minutes at the end of the first half. So, all right, they're in this thing. They're in control now to some degree, not a huge degree, but to some degrry. And that's not continue necessarily. After halftime, there was a pretty awesome Ricochet dunk actually off of a lob by Dyson early in the third quarter. He also did a nice left-handed like spin pivot move for a bucket later on in that quarter. But defensively, it was a little bit rough. They were up actually 8 points with 2:40 to go, but then it was only 1 going to the fourth quarter. They allowed 13 points in the final 2:40 of the third, and that was the start of the slide, I would say. Barlow really struggled. And one thing that I will note that's not exactly a Barlow thing, but it was made worse by this. The Hawks sat both Dyson and Ricochet together at the same time for the entirety of the really bad run Brooklyn had. And with Okongwu off the court. So basically 3 of their top 4 guys were sitting. And those 3 guys are obviously Trey is the 4th one. So those 3 guys are the defensive anchors right now for the Hawks. Ricochet to a slightly less extent to Dyson and Okongwu, but still Ricochet is pretty good already and pretty long and rangy defensively, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not a coincidence to me the Hawks were bad defensively without that group. Now, it was worse than I would have thought, to be fair, but that didn't help. I would probably never sit Dyson and Ricochet together right now. But in particular, without Karis LeVert available, and LeVert, by the way, is not a bad defender. He's pretty decent. But without him on the floor, it made it even worse. It was tough. Brooklyn then had a 10-0 run early in the fourth quarter, and their extended run was 31-12. And that's where the game flipped. The Hawks were up by 8, and when that run ended, they were down by 11. They lost the game right there. It took about, 7 minutes, 8 minutes for the Hawks to go from being not like dominant in control, but certainly in control of the game to some degree to being down 11 points. It was just that fast. And also their first shot defense was really bad. But also, as I mentioned earlier, they couldn't get a rebound, man. It was really when they actually got stops, they couldn't get the stop. They couldn't close it off because they couldn't get a rebound on the glass. Now they did get back into it. Okongwu had a nice 3-point play when it was badly needed at that point in time. Trey hit a 3 to get within 5 mid-quarter. The Hawks won another challenge. They were actually 2-0 on those in this game. They actually got it to 3 multiple times. Trey had a floater with 2:30 to go to make it a 3-point game. But then the Hawks blew a coverage defensively and allowed a 3 to Cam Johnson, the one guy you probably can't lose on Brooklyn. For all I said before about the Nets shooting really well, Cam Johnson is a legitimately high-end shooter. The one guy you don't want to help off of, and they just blew that coverage. That was part of the game in this one. Then the Hawks had their next 2 trips were a Niang missed 3 and a Niang missed 3. And basically, when that all happened, they were down by 10 and it was over. So I didn't love they put Niang back in at that point in time. They closed with Veet and Niang at the forward spots, and I don't really know why. I'm still kind of baffled why Ricochet played 23 minutes. Part of that was because he didn't play the first half because of the auto bench. Fine. I don't like that, but fine. Second half, he just didn't play enough. Like, he played 5 minutes in the fourth, maybe, to start, but like, I would have closed with him pretty clearly, I thought, in this game. And I don't know how you get to the combination of Veet and Niang as my closing forwards. Didn't love that at all. I just put some numbers on in the fourth quarter. Beyond the defense, which was very rough, as I laid out a lot already on this podcast, in the fourth quarter, the Hawks scored less than a point per possession, and they had a 45% true shooting in the fourth quarter. That included 1 of 9 from 3, and they missed their last 5. If any of those go in, it's a different game. Now, that doesn't mean you win it, but they had multiple looks in the last 5 minutes where if it goes down, you're in great shape. Like, Man had one that would have made it like a 1-point game. I feel like maybe 2-point game at one point. And then Niang missed 2 in a row when the game was still very much in the balance. And there you have it. So I gave a bunch of numbers already, but it was the Hawks played well enough to win offensively for 3.5 quarters probably. And that was not enough to overcome the bad defense in the spot. All right. I do have more to come on this game when it comes to how individual players performed. And we'll get to that in just one moment. This show is sponsored by Monarch Money. Have you checked your bank account at some point in time where all of your money happened to go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track sometimes, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Monarch Money is your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances, and Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place, so you can actually just stop managing your money and start building your wealth instead. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery, for example, and now I budget smarter and save more money in the process. Instead of juggling multiple apps, I would say, you can use Monarch to check on your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals as well. And managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever as well. And you can track the shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all of the stress. Take control of your personal finances with Monarch Money. And when you get there, it's code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com, 50% off your first year. One more time, the website is monarchmoney.com. The code is LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year with Monarch Money. All right, we'll dive in now to the player-by-player evaluations in this game. And you probably have a sense of this to some degree already, but there was some good and there was some pretty rough. So 9 guys appeared. Only one player that was in uniform did not play, Garrison Matthews. They were actually knocked down to 10 guys active in this game because of all the injuries and the absences, etc. Garrison not playing wasn't a huge surprise to me, nor was I outraged by that. But Dom Barlow was the 9th man and played poorly, honestly. I like Dom quite a bit. He was their worst player pretty clearly in this game. He did have 3 blocks on the bright side, but was minus 17 in his 15-plus minutes in this game. Didn't score, 0 of 1 from the floor. 2 assists was fine, actually, a couple of nice passes and a rebound. I like Dom Barlow, and I've been high on Dom Barlow the whole time. I will just remind people he's 21 years old, and he's a developmental player right now. And this is also worth keeping in mind. I saw people I know it's spur of the moment, and in the middle of a bad loss, I will certainly grant some clarity there. But ranting about how the Hawks should have went out and got quote unquote a backup center at the deadline. Well, the Hawks have 2 backup centers that are above average. They have Larry Nance Jr. and Clint Capella on their roster. They're just not there right now. Obviously, Nance suffered an injury that was a fluke injury. Capella's away for personal reasons, family reasons. That happens. So yes, Dom Barlow is not a good NBA backup center right now at age 21 on a playoff level team like the Hawks are trying to be. That's fair to say. But he's supposed to be their 4th center, and he's currently their backup center. Keep that little bit of context in mind. But he was their worst player in this game, pretty obviously. And the Hawks got drilled in his minutes. And it was not all on him, to be very, very clear. But the drop-off was very evident from Okongwu to Barlow, which is not surprising. It just was very glaring in this game. Elsewhere, I thought Terrence Mann was not particularly good in this one. He had 13 points, but came on 13 shooting possessions. He was 5 of 9 on 2s, but 0 of 3 from 3. 1 assist, 1 rebound. Defensively, it was pretty rough, I thought, from Terrence at times in this game. Minus 15. Part of that was that he was out there with Barlow a lot, but I think he was pretty below average overall in this game. George Niang, 12 points on 15 shooting possessions. So he was 2 of 5 on 2s, 2 of 9 on 3s, 4 rebounds, an assist. 3 fouls. I don't know why he came back in at the end of the game, which isn't his fault, but he did miss 2 threes at the end of the game. That was like, all right, if you're going to put him in, it looks good if he makes threes, and he didn't make the threes, and that's not anybody's fault necessarily. But I thought Niang was just like okay-ish. The Niang Barlow combination was rough, but the Niang and Okongwu didn't work out very well in this game, so keep that in mind. But he was probably below average for him. Beat Krejci. Offensively looked fine, had 8 points and 2 assists in 27 minutes. Not a lot of volume for him in this game. Did have 2 steals and a block defensively. I don't think Veet's still like 100% physically after the broken back basically that he had, lumbar fracture, but I thought he looked fine. I don't know why he closed the game, but I thought he looked fine. To the starters, Mo Gay, 17 minutes. Mo was not particularly great in this one. Did have 3 block shots. One of them was a highlight level play, but was 0-3 from 3. The offense is a little bit rough. Defensively, he was still probably helpful, but the minus 12 in his 17 minutes was probably telling to some degree in this one. Ricochet, 23 minutes, 16 points, 5 of 5 on 2s, 2 of 8 from 3. So didn't shoot well from 3-point range this game. That's okay. 2 rebounds, 3 fouls, which I made fun of earlier. I don't think Ricochet was great, but he was pretty good in his minutes. It's just that he didn't play a lot and was kind of auto-fouled out by Quinn, and we'll leave it there. Okongwu was good again. 21 points, 15 rebounds, 3 steals, 3 blocks. And by the way, they had a plus 11 net rating with Okongwu on the court in this game. He was good, like capital G good in this game. He now has 6 double-doubles in the last 9 games. He's averaging good numbers. Like, he's been playing like a starting level center. And honestly, he soundly outplayed Nick Claxton in this game, which I know was kind of funny. There's this long-standing bit of Hawks fandom, which it teach their own, that just does not believe Okongwu can play center because he's the height he is. I think it's part of it. And a lot of people have always asked me about Nick Claxton as a potential quote-unquote upgrade on Okongwu. This season, Okongwu's been better than Nick Claxton and is a year younger and makes half as much money. And in this game, he was much better. Obviously, it's one game. You never want to make an evaluation on a player based on one game, but it's not been one game for Okongwu. He's been playing really well. So keep that in mind. He was not the problem at all, by the way, plus 9 in his minutes. And again, minus 17 with him off the court. Dyson Daniels, the crazy stat numbers continue when it comes to his steals. 4 in this game. He has now had 4 steals or more in 24 games this year. That's the most in a season since 2003, Allen Iverson. He already has more total steals this season than a player has had in the NBA in 15 years. The Hawks have 14 games left. So, yeah. Offensively, not his absolute best, but he did have 7 assists, attacked the rim pretty well. He was good in this game overall. Again, all 4 of the core pieces, in particular the 3 veteran-ish core pieces, were all good. It's just that everybody else was not. And then Trae Young, it wasn't like an A+++ Trae game, but he was good in this game. 28 points, 12 assists, 6 rebounds. He was 6 of 13 on 2, which is not great, but 3 of 5 from 3, 7 of 8 from the line. The 28 points on 22 shooting possessions, really efficient from him. 12 assists. He did have 6 turnovers, but that's okay when you have 12 assists. It's not great, but it's fine-ish. So, Trae was not his absolute best, but he certainly was not the problem. He was good in this game. It was the supporting cast that let them down in a big way. So, from here, the Hawks also got a little bit of a bad break today. So, Friday, they were bailed out a little bit because the Hawks lost Friday to the Clippers, but both the Magic and the Heat lost. This time around, the Hawks lose today in maddening, poor fashion, and the Magic upset the Cavs. They were 10-point underdogs today, and they beat the Cavs. The Cavs had won 1 million games in a row, and that was not great for the Hawks. So the lead now for the 7th seed is down to a half game over the Magic. It is still 2.5 over the Heat for the 8-9 versus thing right now, but a costly day for Atlanta, to say the least. Not the end of the world. They do play the Magic, by the way, 2 more times this year, so that head-to-head might decide the whole thing anyway by the end. But it was a not great day of the office, even beyond the loss, to have Orlando upset Cleveland too. Add a little bit of salt in the wound if you are the Hawks on this particular day. But hey, it's one day, flush it, and they can move on to Tuesday. Speaking of Tuesday, the Hawks are in Charlotte on Tuesday for the second matchup against the Hornets in a week. They just beat the Hornets at home just a few days ago at this point in time. They play Tuesday, and spoiler alert, the Hawks don't play again after Tuesday until Saturday. They have 3 full days off, which is not a usual thing. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they will be off, which I have to say works out great for me as someone who has to cover the NCAA tournament. I do a lot of college basketball writing this time of year, and not upset about not having Hawks games Thursday and Friday. But alas, I'll have content for you about the draft, by the way, hopefully in advance of that. In the meantime, I am planning to have a show Monday evening about something, so we'll see how that goes, whether it's a mailbag or whatever. By the way, if you ever have mailbag questions, send them to me. I don't always do a mailbag call, so you can obviously send them to me on Twitter /X. I'm at BT Rowland. The show is at Locked on Hawks. Also, you can send them to me on Blue Sky at BT Rowland, and I also have an email address for the show. It's lockedonhawks@gmail.com. And before we get out of here, please subscribe to the podcast. I appreciate everyone listening to the show, as always, especially after a loss. Not everyone does that, and I salute you if you made it this far in the podcast. But please subscribe on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify, likes, ratings, subscriptions, shares, all that fun stuff to support the podcast. And please tell your friends about the show. If you are a online person, do it online, whether it be on Reddit or socials or whatever. Share the podcast there. If you are more of an offline person, tell a friend, text somebody that's a Hawks fan. Hey, check out this podcast. Very much appreciate all of that. But there you go, everybody. Hopefully the rest of the week will be better for the Hawks. But in the meantime, I appreciate you listening to the show. We'll be back in about 24 hours with more content on the Hawks. And we'll see you all next time.